All right. Hello, and everyone, and welcome to the Arianne Phosphate Fireside Chat. My name is Robert Blum, managing partner here at Lytham Partners, and today I have the honor of moderating a Q&A discussion with Brian Ostroff, Arianne's president. Brian, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Robert. Good to see you again.
You as well. Let's dive right in. Provide us with a history of maybe both the project and your background as well, and how you became involved in Arianne.
Sure. Very quickly, I'll handle the easy one. I know that one fairly well. I'm a financial capital markets guy. Spent my career in that area. So I was with a US M&A firm and a couple of large Canadian banks in a couple of capacities. I had always looked at the mining space, had moved over and was an early partner at a fund that did just early stage mining. With that, actually, our fund had made an investment in Arianne Phosphate. Um, I guess just along the way, our fund got a little bigger and bigger in the name, and I got more and more involved in the file. Ultimately, wound up moving over to Arianne in senior management, and I sit on the board as well. In regards to Arianne, but high level, it's a very large phosphate project. We got involved, like I said, because it was very interesting. It was early days, and it was roughly 12, 13 years ago. The company needed funding to pursue its deposit. And so, look, the path forward for all of it has been very, very good. Monies were used, the usual drilling, metallurgy, etc. Advancing the project kept getting larger, the economics kept getting better, the metallurgy just kept on confirming what we had. And so, that moved all the way until pretty much the end of 2015, very end of 2015, when Arianne had received its permits. So it is a fully permitted mine. And then that was followed towards the end of 2018 when the Port of Saguenay got the okay to build a loading facility. So that's kind of the extremely high level and quick history on the project. We can dig a little deeper into it, of course.
Yeah. Let's go there now, right? I mean, the project Lacapal, what sort of sets it apart from other phosphate mines globally? Maybe especially in terms of its, maybe geological advantages and sort of concentrate quality.
Yeah, look, excellent question, because that is certainly one of the highlights of the deposit. So most of the world's phosphate comes from sedimentary deposits. I'm not going to bore our listeners, but over 90% of the world's phosphate deposits are sedimentary. And the challenge with sedimentary deposits are they tend to have deleterious elements. So that's radioactive elements like uranium and thorium. They tend to have heavy metals like mercury, cadmium, arsenic, and ultimately that's a challenge, right? I mean, you're dealing with phosphate, which is predominantly an agricultural commodity, and these are not the things that you want in your agriculture. And ultimately, whatever your use of that phosphate is, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit, it's contaminated. Now, there are these rare deposits, they're igneous, and that makes up maybe about 10% of the world's phosphate. And those are quite rare. Although interestingly, for a mine, they're not rare. Like most gold or copper, lead, zinc, nickel, those deposits are all igneous. So they were formed, basically from a volcano or some seismic event where lava poured in and it carried the mineral in question. Again, gold, copper, or in our case, apatite, which is the phosphate-bearing mineral. Now, what is interesting about that is it has very little to no contaminants. And so what that means is it allows Arianne to make a very, very pure phosphate concentrate. So ultimately, whatever downstream product you're making, you just don't have those challenges. The last interesting thing, I think, with regards to the igneous deposits, aside from them being quite rare, the majority of them actually are in Russia. And, so that is a problem in terms of igneous. And you know what? I'm going to get in front of your next question. One of the things that generally is interesting, I think, about phosphate, interesting or concerning, depending how you look at it, is look, this is a necessary commodity. We need it for our fertilizer. Most people understand that phosphate is a macronutrient in fertilizer, along with potash and nitrogen, but they are different. And you do need all three, particularly depending what crop you are growing, maybe in different ratios, but you do need all three. The thing that's challenging in regards to phosphate is most of the world is short phosphate. So, here in North America, a lot of agriculture, you know what? We have some phosphate, but not enough. We run a deficit and we need to import it. South America needs to import it. Western Europe needs to import it. Parts of Asia, a lot of Asia are importers as well. So, we are all short phosphate. And phosphate is a commodity that demands grow on it every single year. It doesn't matter what the economy is doing, what the markets are doing. So we're all short, we're getting shorter. Where do we get this stuff from? What's making that up? And the answer is Middle East and North Africa, MENA. Today, Morocco is by far the world's largest producer. Morocco's a good address. It's unfortunately in a bad neighborhood. Jordan, Egypt, Algeria. I mean, these are all areas where we're reliant on receiving phosphate. As I had mentioned, Russia is a producer. China produces a lot of downstream phosphate fertilizers, the MAP and DAP. So, I think it's important that the world understand that we do have a bit of an issue here, including here in North America.
All right.
Excuse me.
No, all right. That's so we've talked sort of about the we'll call it the geological advantages, right? We're talking about sort of the geographic advantages. Maybe and something you touched on here just a moment ago, which is sort of the end market uses for it. Talk about sort of where phosphate, what applications it goes into today, but maybe more specifically how Arianne's sort of this high purity concentrate fits into, maybe these traditional markets like fertilizers, but also these emerging markets like LFP batteries.
Yeah, excellent question. So phosphate, in very broad terms, basically that phosphate concentrate can get made into one of three classes of products. So the bulk dry commodities like MAP and DAP that we've talked about. Then there's a good tier liquid, phosphoric acid, that makes its way into things like animal feeds and specialty fertilizers. And then at the very top, there's purified phosphoric acid and the really purified stuff, the white acid. And so that's the material that winds up into food, if you drink Coca-Cola or you drink deli meats, preservatives, things like that, that is purified phosphoric acid, PPA, and as you had touched on, and we'll dig into it a little bit more, but is the LFP battery, the lithium iron phosphate battery, and there again you need a high purity phosphoric acid. Now, what's interesting is if you look at basically those three product buckets, the quality of your phosphate concentrate is going to determine if you can make certain certain of those products, basically going up the scale, and how much you can make. So, there's a lot of sedimentary deposits that can't be purified to a level that would allow you to make the white acid, the PPA. And even the sedimentary deposits that, are, say, not as contaminated, or you can manage that contamination. There's only a certain percentage of that material that you can take all the way up to a purified phosphoric acid. So to just give you a sense of that, if I have a really good sedimentary deposit and I want to make purified phosphoric acid, like white acid, I can make maybe 1 unit of that white acid, 1 unit of that good kind of liquid, and I'm left with 7, 8, 9, 10 units that then basically have those contaminants and get turned into fertilizer. Now, in the case of Arianne, because we have such a high purity concentrate, we in essence don't have any leftovers that need to be turned into fertilizer. So where you might be looking at, say, a 1:1:8 ratio for a good sedimentary deposit, in our case, we would be a 2:1:0. Again, we don't have any garbage left over. And so, look, that matters for a lot of reasons. But first off, it's just, what do you sell this stuff for? So MAP and DAP today trade for, depending which market and what have you, but in and around 600, 650 a ton. That good quality liquid that goes into animal feeds and that, you're looking at roughly 1,200 a ton. And then the white acid, the really good stuff, you're only, if you can make it, you're talking about a product that sells for in the neighborhood of $2,500 a ton. So your ability to target those higher end markets is well rewarded, but again, it's your ability to do so. And Arianne's very fortunate in that our concentrate really does allow us to target those upper end products.
Let's dive a little bit further into the LFP batteries, right? Sort of talk about, maybe this overall shift and diversifying of supply chains and how your project there sort of opens up the opportunity, sort of North America, but really on a global basis.
Yeah. So, the LFP's an interesting history, and it's actually quite a long history, although North Americans don't really understand how long that history is. But ironically, the LFP battery was developed in North America in the early 90s out of the University of Texas, and then ultimately really made its way towards a commercial product based on work that was done up here in the province of Quebec. Didn't meet with immediate commercial success, and so the battery kind of made its way over to Asia, where it got better economies of scale, etc. And the LFP battery really is a dominant battery technology in Asia, and has been for a long time. Now, over the last few years, the LFP has made its way here into the West. There's a lot of advantages. They're safer, many more cycles, easy to optimize the charging times and cycles, and arguably easier access to the materials. Nickel sometimes could be a little difficult. Cobalt, certainly, the LFP, lithium iron phosphate, is a little bit more manageable. So over the last few years, the LFP has made its way back to the West, for, again, a lot of these reasons. But the challenge, of course, is you're playing catch up. I mean, today, China produces over 95% of those LFPs. And, the West is really looking to maybe onshore, friendshore, security of supply, and to get into the markets of the components that they need for these new batteries. And see, I even made that mistake. It's not a new battery, but growing demand for this particular battery chemistry. And so, let's talk just a little bit about that. As I had mentioned, the LFP is a very interesting chemistry. It has a lot of advantages. It has a lot of advantages, whereby a lot of the auto companies are using LFP batteries in their cars. GM has made a lot of headway. Hyundai, Volkswagen, Tesla. All these guys are pursuing LFP strategies. But one of the things that I think a lot of people don't know about the LFP is, or don't recognize the importance of, is the energy storage market. So, energy storage systems, ESS, that's when basically put solar panels on your roof and you're capturing that energy, and it's great to capture it, but you need to store it because you're not home during the day. You need that energy when you come home at the end of the day and you want to cook dinner and, plug in your laptop and all of that. And so, the energy storage market today is absolutely dominated by the LFP. Over 85% of all energy storage systems are LFP. I'm talking residential and small grid. And it is growing rapidly. And, if you take a look, say in 2024, like a lot of people think the EV and it's underperformed and it's dead and, whatever. That's just not the case. The toothpaste isn't going back into the tube. The EV is here. And I think a lot of the listeners here today would be surprised to understand that even in 2024, EV sales were up over 25%. So that's big. But going back to my other comment with regards to energy storage systems sales were up 53%. So it's growing at twice the rate. And, if you take a look, you are going to just see massive, massive growth in energy storage systems. Of course, you're going to see growth in EVs, but the numbers are quite impressive. And there are those that think that actually by 2030, you're going to have just as many LFPs used in energy storage systems as you are for cars. So, all of those out there that think the EV is dead and, it's not going anywhere and therefore all of these batteries and what have you. A, I beg to differ, but B, don't neglect the energy storage systems. So, at the end of the day, and your question, what does that mean for Arianne, what have you? How does this all tie back to us? Well, as we had said earlier, what you need for LFP batteries is white acid, the purified phosphoric acid. And for all the reasons we've talked about, it's not that easy to basically expand production of white acid. First of all, again, a lot of it comes from China. Here, there are a couple of players, but again, you have those challenges because if I'm in the fertilizer business, but I make white acid, for every 1 unit of white acid I make, I might be making 10 units of fertilizer. I'm in the fertilizer business. If I go and I do that, I'm going to create a whole lot of supply of something, and my overall profitability is going to, go down. It's going to be very challenging. Now, again, in the case of Arianne, where we can target that white acid market and not have to worry about, kind of the leftovers to go into fertilizer, that gives us a huge advantage. So we're here in the West where we need it. The project is, and we'll drill down, I'm sure, into the project specifically, but is very large and is very capable of addressing some of these needs. But if you look at projections, battery projections, etc., there's about 4 million tons a year of purified phosphoric acid that's produced in the world, of which maybe about half of that is good enough, is like white acid. We're going to need another 1 million tons additional of white acid just to meet battery demand. So there's a big shortage coming. And, I think Ariane's in a pretty good place to be able to capitalize on what's coming.
All right. Let's talk economics just a little bit in the time we have left here. Talk about sort of the economics, both of the mine, but also sort of this proposed downstream PPA facility. And you've put some rather robust economic numbers out there. How does that stack against other phosphate or critical mineral projects out there?
Yeah, well, certainly, look, the mine itself, today it is the world's single largest greenfield phosphate deposit. As we've touched on, we make an extremely pure concentrate. And from a security of supply, we're here in Quebec, Canada. I should also mention, given the importance of phosphate, both Quebec and Canada back in 2024 did add phosphate to the critical mineral list. So the project itself, the mine, again, fully permitted, shovel ready, very robust economics. But one of the things that we really have focused on, say, over the last year and a half, is this whole downstream. So again, we have this ideal phosphate concentrate to make the purified phosphoric acid. And that really separates us from most guys. So even though we're extremely, extremely small, I mean, we're not Morocco, we're not Nutrien, we're not Mosaic. But what we do have is this really, really special phosphate rock. And so we've really focused our attention over the last, like I say, year and a half of looking to take advantage of that and build the downstream facility as well. So we would have the upstream, the mine, and then we would have a downstream facility where we could process that phosphate concentrate into the white acid. So we had released back in June our pre-feasibility study. As studied, it would produce about 350,000 tons of white acid and about 220,000 tons of that second tier good liquid. That would make us the largest producer of white acid outside of China. As mentioned, the numbers are pretty robust. We would be amongst the cheapest cash cost providers. And of course, this would be for the battery industry. Canada, Quebec in particular, has really set out to be a major hub of the Western battery ecosystem, of course, North America. So we would look to produce this here in the Saguenay area of Quebec, access to water, access to rail, access to Bécancour, which is the kind of Quebec battery hub right now, access to rail, get to the U.S. auto industry in Michigan or the U.S. battery belt down in Tennessee, Alabama. So, look, the numbers are spectacular, and really in a market that we need it, especially if we want to move away from a reliance on China.
All right, Brian, I got 2 minutes here. Two more topics I want to touch on quickly. You've recently had a major investment from sort of a mining firm out there, I think it was defined as. Talk about that and how maybe it helps to de-risk the project and appeal to, ultimately the goal of offtake agreements here.
Yeah. So as I touched on earlier, we have an igneous deposits, a hard rock deposits, very similar to a gold or copper or any of those. So if you are accustomed to building and operating large open pit hard rock mines, certainly you could do that in the case of phosphate. So this mining company has been exploring opportunities in critical minerals. Certainly the mining aspect of it was easy to understand. Again, if they're used to building large open pit copper mines, they can build this. And so they've made a small investment so far, really with an eye towards understanding the downstream, maybe partnering with a downstream player and look to take advantage. And it is a good entree into the critical minerals because at the end of the day, if all the battery doomsayers are right and batteries never happen, and we're using fossil fuels for the next 100 years, okay, well, guess what? That phosphate can easily make fertilizer. So you've got all the opportunity and all the upside of a critical mineral, along with all the safety of agriculture, food. No phosphate, no food. So, I think that that's certainly their interest. And to your point of de-risking, these guys know how to build big mines and have deep pockets. And hopefully we can finalize some kind of arrangement with them. And it certainly helps make the project a reality.
All right, Brian, final question here. What are sort of the top reasons investors should be excited about Arianne right now?
Well, Arianne really is a pretty unique story. There's not a whole lot of phosphate plays out there. And I think with the growing importance of phosphate, not only in the worlds of fertilizer, but now with regards to LFP, it is a relatively unique opportunity. Company's been around for quite a while. We've spent over $100 million to, again, wind up with the biggest, purest, safest, and what's now a commodity that's even more in demand, for which the market has been kind enough to reward us with about a $30 million market cap. As I'm sure a lot of people listening to this today understand that the market itself, the junior market, has just not been wonderful. So investors here have an opportunity to pick up something that is very valuable, worth a lot more, or certainly a lot more money put in vis-a-vis the market cap. As you had dealt with in the last question, we do have a good mining company invested. Quebec government owns 6% of us. So really it is a good opportunity. And the company, lastly, has been around for a long time, and I'm sure a lot of people recognize the name, but it was a fertilizer story. A whole lot has changed in the last couple of years with the LFP. So I would encourage would-be investors to do a little bit more digging. Again, meet up with us and get into some greater depth.
All right, fantastic, Brian. Well, we will leave it there. Thank you as always for your time. I always enjoy. Thank you to everybody here watching. As Brian just sort of alluded to at the end there, if you'd like to schedule a meeting with Brian or have additional questions that we can help answer, please send me an email. That's Blum, B-L-U-M, at lythampartners.com. We do have additional presentations and fireside chats coming up next, so please stick around. Again, Brian, thanks so much for your time.
Thank you.